Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, CJOPS was unable to present today due to other commitments. I've been invited from Headquarters Joint Operations Command to talk to the spectrum of littoral operations, but I think in order to set the context of the tactical sphere of warfare or operations versus the operational level against which I'll have my commentary, I think it's important to set some of the context. So I won't be talking about the doctrinal elements of the spectrum of littoral operations. You can all read that yourself. I will be endeavouring to talk about real-world operations. So I think it's important for you to understand the command I work in and the nature of what that command does. So please indulge me whilst I quickly describe that environment, one which has evolved rapidly within the last decade, and therefore some of you may not be familiar with it. Many of you will recall the shift from what used to be a strategic operations division here in Canberra and environmental or service commands to the Headquarters Australian Theatre design with component commands. In the pursuit of greater efficiency and effectiveness and pursuit of an organisation that better delineated the raise, train, sustain or force generation of the single service functions from operations, Headquarters JOC was established with the JOC complex at Bungendore being opened in 2009. JOC's mission is to plan, control and conduct military operations and joint exercises and other directed activities in order to meet Australia's national objectives. The services and other enablers retain the responsibility to force generate the necessary capabilities at the directed level of capability and readiness notice. The Chief of Joint Operations is the Commander of Headquarters JOC. He's a 3-star officer who reports directly to CDF on operational matters. He has that mission to plan, control and conduct military campaigns. Currently, Vice Admiral David Johnson is the current incumbent, having relieved an Army General a bit over 2 years ago. The Headquarters is based on the NATO joint structure, modified to our needs, which employs a range of 1-star and 06 officers as his principal or specialist staff, with environmental subject matter expertise advice coming from service components co-located at JOC. There's also a range of LOs from other government agencies located within the Headquarters critical to our planning and execution of operations. So as the J3 or the Director General of Operations, I'm responsible to CJOPS for matters relating to ongoing operations and therefore the lead staff branch to ensure that the Commander's intent is met. So through the wider Headquarters, CJOPS exercises theatre command, essentially the operational component of full command of Chief of Defence Force assigned forces contributing to joint operations and exercises both domestically and overseas. So this is typically done by CJOPS exercising his command responsibilities directly to JT or Joint Task Force commanders or contingent commanders. So what drives our business? That's just a quick snapshot of the theatre for us as a single, like a combatant command in the US parlance. The theatre is the globe for us, so we have operations around the globe and near our region and domestically as well. That's just a snapshot, clearly not all literal, not yet anyway. This slide shows how Australia's high-level national strategic interests cascade into the military strategic guidance which shapes Australia's operational commitments. So in addition to the obvious strategic documents such as the White Paper, Defence Planning Guidance and Australia's military strategy, JOC fuses a range of inputs including the Defence International Engagement Program, Joint Collective Training Requirements. CJOPS is the Joint Collective Training Authority and Certification of Joint Forces, and various defence strategy papers which inform an operational assessment of the risk across our theatre in order to inform decision making in which to mitigate risks and identify opportunities and ultimately plan and execute a range of operations and ADF activities. So utilising this risk-based approach, JOC develops and refines a range of contingency plans and operational concepts focused on the near strategic environment with a forecast out a number of years, and subsequently the promulgation of the orders for the directed operations and activities. So the battle rhythm requires an evolving process that seeks to continually understand the environment, set and shape our theatre, and being prepared to respond as risks are realised or conduct activities to mitigate risks with a focus on a lessons approach to all activities. And layered on top of this approach, unforecasted and emergency events such as natural disasters keep the headquarters busy and focused on commanding operations, undertaking deliberate and crisis planning, with history showing that the ADF operations in the littoral, particularly in the amphibious arena, are many and varied across both the deliberate and the crisis spectrum of operations. So in the context of this background, CJOP seeks to set for ADF operations within our immediate regional theatre. So with an eye on the future, which I'll touch on shortly, and reflecting on recent demands for littoral effects, where have we been operating and where might we be required to operate into the future? Operation Render Safe focuses on supporting countries in the Southwest Pacific to remove explosive remnants of war left over from World Wars I and II, typically from areas close to shore and onshore or in the littoral area. It's conducted on occurrence such as when dangerous items of old ordnance might be located where it presents an unacceptable risk to a community in the Southwest Pacific, but we also conduct it in a more deliberate manner on a yearly or 2-yearly basis. It typically includes a multinational joint task force and has been undertaken in a number of countries including Kiribati, Vanuatu, Bougainville in Papua New Guinea, and more recently, a 4-week operation in the Solomon Islands that involved maritime and land EOD elements, mine hunters and a Kiwi dive tender. In 2014, this particular operation saw a joint task force, the largest of its type for this operation, based out of the LSD HMAS Choules. It was able to project EOD effects across a large amphibious operation, utilising organic landing craft and aircraft. Choules provided the necessary sustainment, the logistic support and the command and control support that proved highly effective, which enabled the ADF to go back into Bougainville after a significant period of absence. So if you just indulge me just quickly, I had the great fortune of being the JDF commander for that. And if you look at that picture, is it a happy snap or is there a reflection there of the success of the operation? So was this it was about and certainly the tangible outcomes of reducing the ERW threat to the community, opening up land for subsistence farming, clearing offshore areas for fishermen. This was the first time that we'd been into a live personnel minefield since the Vietnam era, and we cleared 2 of those. So, there was clearly some real practical outcomes to the operation. But, getting back into Bougainville after having been such a long time away, there was a lot of effort put into leading up to the operation to ensure that we were well postured, engaged with the community, and that's the sort of reception that we got. It was highly successful and is a real template for some of our other shaping operations that we might seek to do in the region. Render Safe is a fantastic opportunity for the ADF to undertake activities in our near region, the Southwest Pacific, in locations where we want to influence whilst cleaning up the environment. It makes a big difference for us in the Southwest Pacific. The Minister's already touched on some aspects of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, which unfortunately for us, for the ADF, is regular trade in the region, where we've delivered HADR effects to our part of the world for many decades. With extensive archipelagos and the very maritime nature of our region through the Southeast Asia and Southwest Pacific, our contributions, the ADF is, as I mentioned, regularly contributing to what is a DFAT-led whole-of-government effort. The various classes of amphibious ships over the years have all contributed to a range of HADR responses, with the old warhorse HMAS Tobruk contributing to cyclone relief operations in Vanuatu as late as 3 months prior to her decommissioning in July last year, as well as having contributed significantly to the Philippines late in 2013. The new amphibious ship capabilities both the LHDs and the LSD, are real game changers for this. As soon as we start to consider a medium to heavy response options, we're immediately looking towards the amphibious ships as a minimum to deliver those heavy HADR effects into an affected AO. And sea lift is the baseline for that, where there is a seaport available unaffected in the affected region. But I consider it's actually more likely, similar to what we did this year, that an appropriately structured amphibious force built around the ARE construct, the amphibious ready element construct, given the inherent flexibility, the integral joint C2 within that force, and a force that is actually trained and certified for this very role, utilising amphibious concepts, doctrine to generate the desired amphibious effects is much more likely in the future. The dock capabilities in the LSD and LHD, with their organic landing craft and the integration of heavy and medium lift helicopters into the amphibious orbit, provide significant flexibility without the reliance on accessible seaports, and they're therefore able to deliver distributed effects across the AO. So just like Operation Fiji Assist this year, which did include an LHD-based amphibious force around HMAS Canberra, these relatively new capabilities will feature regularly in these operations. With the pending onset of the high-risk weather season, which is expected to actually generate a slightly above average tropical cyclones in our region, there is every possibility we'll be mounting a response option in the near future. I'll leave further discussion on Fiji Assist because I believe Captain Sonner, the commander of the Australian Amphibious Task Group, will discuss some elements of that further. But needless to say, within the context of my earlier remarks about influencing our region, and indeed the Minister alluded to some of this, both regionally and also in dialogue with her Singaporean counterpart. The amphibious presence in Fiji this year, where we had not had any notable ADF presence for some time, undoubtedly provided some very useful observations to our Fijian friends and our near neighbours. So if I can quickly scan into the future and maybe touch on some key events that might generate some planning effort for the ADF that might incorporate amphibious or littoral response options for JOC. I've previously mentioned Operation Render Safe. It is an enduring operation, and we need to determine exactly where we might conduct this activity next year and into the future years, and what that force structure might include. That operation has grown from what was very much on occurrence to one that is very much in CJOPS's mind as an opportunity to shape the environment. It will undoubtedly, as it has done for all iterations, be in the littoral environment. It's quite possible that an amphibious-based option might be explored, given the highly successful iteration of Render Safe 14, as I just mentioned. And that particular operation demonstrated the uniqueness of conducting EOD operations across the littoral based out of an amphibious ship. Whilst HMAS Canberra recently deployed for RIMPAC in Hawaii this year, we're now looking towards where a future joint amphibious task force, most likely based around an LHD, might conduct a deployment next year and subsequent years. Such an activity and other countries, the US, the UK and the Netherlands, who have some very mature models, you could expect, you'd expect that capability to provide a persistent presence, able to visit a number of nations with various capabilities on board, has great potential to undertake international engagement and support whole of government diplomatic efforts whilst building some capacity in some of those locations and providing a clear demonstration of our amphibious capabilities, whilst undertaking a range of exercises across the region. So whatever is in will be put in place for those deployments in the future. Needless to say, they will be busy and hectic. And if we scan a bit further out into the region and we look out into further years, there are some key activities that might require some planning effort and ultimately execution by Joint Ops Command. Clearly right at the top now is planning for submarine cable defence. Thank you for that. We haven't looked at that yet, but you're looking at 2018. APEC is a key event in our region, and what might the government of Papua New Guinea ask in terms of support from the Australian government? But I'd suspect that if there is an ADF contribution, an amphibious force would be right at the top of the list there, I think, because like we have in some of our other deployments, we don't impact on the local infrastructure, local resources. We can sea base and still generate a wide range of effects. A bit further afield, the Bougainville referendum in 2019. Clearly, a secure region is very much in our interests, and Operating Safe in 14 was very much about the eye on that particular event that was coming up. We're in that window. It appears that in middle of 19 that event will occur, and we don't know what the Australian government might be asked to do or support in that regards. So, I'll just touch on a couple of these notable but key events into the future that are in environments which really do invite ADF operations in the littoral space. We don't know, and I can only, really at this point in time can only speculate because we haven't been invited into foreign countries, but we'll continue to assess and posture ourselves, the ADF, the Joint Forces, for a range of options. Irrespective, the maritime geography of our region requires a responsive and capable littoral force capable of responding to a range of risks. And without doubt, as history has shown and nature will dictate, an amphibious deployment in response to a regional disaster will be on the books in the near future. Mine warfare and clearance diving and hydrographic ship capabilities and a range of joint enablers will also continue to make key contribution in the littoral arena. The HS ships, as you know, continually under Navy's operational authority and under the hydrographer's direction, continually routinely busy with their national requirements. As the Amphibious Task Force continues to force generate higher end warfighting skills, the ADF will soon have an expeditionary capability able to execute a range of amphibious mission sets, including HADR and stability and security operations across the region, which will provide CJOPs and our planners at JOC with a large set of response options, be it for crisis response or contingency planning, or in undertaking a broad range of activities within Australia's national interest. So Desmond, that's where, given the bell's gone, mate, that's where I'm finishing up. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much. Confident that will generate a range of questions. Can I have a question? Yes.
Sir, Josh Clifford. Thank you. Noting your time as Commodore ATG and now J3, what kind of concept does JOC have for that regional engagement that you highlighted for the Amphib Task Group and the ARE, more specifically on a routine nature?
So I alluded to the a deployment next year, and we're reliant, and Commodore Hughes there is an expert, and Captain Sonner's all across this, but we anticipate, is it how many days a year, Steve? Sorry? 150 sea days, but in terms of deployment, a couple of deployments a year, but we expect, sorry mate, 60 days. So in the plans area where all this is all stitched together, they do the cunning plan and kick it over the fence to me to execute. But I talked about that risk-based approach that CJOPS has. So look, they're working on what's going to occur next year. We expect it to be in the region. And as I say, it will stitch together a whole range of activities and international engagement objectives. But I think that system and model needs to mature, and I think in years to come, I would like to think that we get to that space where the Dutch and the UK are in terms of some of these deployments. But it's sort of the world's your oyster nearly, I think, with what we can do with the Amphibious Task Force.
Question.
To Commander Finn Kemp, as we progress down the amphibious track and become more complex in what we do, what's your relationship with other agencies, for instance, DFAT, Federal Police? Are they following us down this path?
Oh, absolutely. The work that Deployable Joint Force Headquarters has led in terms of, and there's a couple of people in this room that have been intimately involved in that, we're bringing them along for the ride. DFAT are really on board, particularly in this HADR space. They're involved in the inaugural joint training and certification for the activity last year. It opened their eyes quite wide, as were the AFP. And so when Brett took the amphibious task force to Fiji this year, they were right in there. They knew how to. They already had experienced people. They knew how to get from their bunk to the mess and into the planning spaces, and they were a significant contributor. So we are well connected with other government agencies that have relevance in the various spaces, and particular HADR is DFAT, that will continue to be fostered. As I mentioned, we have other government agency liaison officers out at JOC, and DFAT and AFP are just two of those.
So do you see any limitations to the employment of an amphibious task group?
Any limitations?
Yeah. What can't it do?
Well, it can't do what it hasn't been trained to do, for a start. At the moment, the single services provided direction on what forces they need to raise, and there's limitations to what they can do with the equipment sets they've got. But there are. Doctrinally, there's a spectrum of operations up to the high-end warfighting, down to the more peace-like type operations such as HADR. But we need to be careful that we are not setting expectations, particularly for government, of doing activities I think that we're not trained to do or certified to do. It presents a range of risks, be it to personnel, for safety, or for reputation. But look, it is a very flexible and capable organisation, and I think we've demonstrated that this year with the deployment, with a range of deployments, both in Choules but in Canberra this year, particularly to Fiji. As the Minister mentioned, it's opened a lot of people's eyes, and I think it will be the centre of the Joint Force into the future. I'd love to see it doing lots of stuff. But.
So thank you very much for that presentation, which is given us a very good foundation of what comes next, which is Admiral Lever.